Hello and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Cultivate Communications. We're dedicated to helping our clients reach their business objectives by applying sales-centric marketing strategies. I'm your host, Marianne Long, and today's topic is sales and marketing alignment. Now, you may be thinking this is not a new problem, and you are absolutely right. This is an ongoing issue for many businesses. Some experts are telling us, however, that the issue has actually intensified over the last few years. And this might be due to some of the new technologies that have emerged that are designed to help us to improve sales and marketing, communications, and data management. However, because of their complexity, sometimes that requires more complex processes and it slows down communication. Now, the other issue is that as a result of COVID, we all know many more of us are actually working remotely, and this can even create more distance between marketing and sales. To help us to really kind of understand how deep this problem is, I pulled some statistics from Forrester and Marketo. And so Forrester tells us that only 8% of companies claim to have alignment between sales and marketing. But good things can happen, according to Marketo research, when companies do work towards aligning. In fact, they found that companies reported to them that they had 209% more revenue, and they were 67% better at closing deals. That's pretty substantial. So when marketing and sales are aligned, good things can happen. And, from my experience, there is definitely a way to stop that vicious cycle. Cultivate actually helps companies with this by starting to look first at their revenue goals and then reverse engineering how marketing and sales need to kind of step up and work together and collaborate to meet those revenue goals. To help me explore the art of possible in addressing this ongoing issue, our guest, Mike Carroll, is here with us. Mike is founder and managing partner of Intelligent Conversations. They are a sales transformation consultancy. So Mike and I have both advised clients on narrowing the chasm between sales and marketing, and we have slightly different perspectives. Mike's is a little more so from the sales side, and me, I'm looking at things a little bit more from the marketing perspective and trying to understand how marketing can help to close the loop with sales. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, thank you, Marianne. So it's great to join someone who has a similar viewpoint and has navigated this chasm between, sales and marketing misalignment, and really appreciate the approach that you guys take at Cultivate in terms of bridging that gap and helping customers. I love the phrase sales-centric marketing because I think too often marketing firms kind of look at just the marketing side of it, not the sales side of it. So I love the reverse engineering and how you start with revenue. That's exactly aligned with how we approach it at Intelligent Conversations. So let's talk about this chasm. And I'm going to go through a number of topics. I want to start with where the wheels fall off. And the first point is sales and marketing leaders aren't always on the same page, right? And I know that sounds obvious, but when I think about a sales organization, when I think about an organization, I think about the first team being the CEO and their immediate leadership team, that kitchen cabinet. Typically it's a CEO, COO, the chief financial officer, marketing, sales. Maybe there's a couple other positions involved in that. That leadership team, each with their own organization, that's really the first team. And too often, sales and marketing leaders are competitive rather than collaborative. They're not thinking of themselves as teammates on that same leadership team. Rather, they're thinking of themselves as the head of their respective organizations. So that's really, if we want to nip this in the bud, we really have to get the sales leader and the marketing leader to be aligned and on the same page. Some of the aspects of that is we see a lack of ownership and accountability. We see a to me mindset instead of a by me mindset. What do I mean by that? Well, if sales is frustrated with marketing, they're going to say, I can't believe they're doing this to me. I can't believe they're getting these kind of leads for me. This isn't what we wanted, right? Or if marketing is frustrated with sales, they're like, I can't believe they're doing this to me. They're not following up on the leads. They're not pursuing them with the same vigor that they pursue other activities. And when we can get the sales leader and the marketing leader on the same page, approaching it as if they were teammates in that first team before they transfer and lead their respective organizations, that's a key part of getting past this finger pointing that happens too often, that lack of accountability and ownership. Another thing that happens, and this is, I'll own this since I'm a guy coming at this from a sales perspective. I can tell you, salespeople discount leads generated by marketing. It's just natural. They will pursue leads that they generate on their own, whether it's a referral or a cold call or whatever. They'll pursue that with more vigor and intensity than the marketing generated leads. I think part of it goes back to this trust mindset. Salespeople trade in a currency of trust. And so when a system shows one negative result, when a system shows, oh, that one lead wasn't very good, that one contact is no longer there, that one time marketing did that, all leads are that way. And they immediately discard leads and will overemphasize the stuff they generated on their own, not understanding that, hey, there's going to be some noise in the data. And if, 70% of the leads that come from marketing are solid and 30% are maybe awful to directionally accurate, that's not bad. We're not going to get 100%. Oh, by the way, if you remind them of all the no's they heard as they were cold calling, and remind them of all the conflict they had just trying to get to their leads that they're pursuing with vigor, they're going to quickly remember they're not perfect either. There is somewhat of a throw it over the wall mindset. There's a belief that, hey, I've done my job, I've generated leads, or I've done my job, I dutifully called the lead and it wasn't very good, I'm throwing it back at marketing. And so when that happens, again, that goes back to the lack of alignment at the top and this sort of lack of ownership and accountability. If we think of ourselves as being on the same team instead of being competitors, we're gonna get over that, clumsy handoff and that throw it over the wall mindset. And then finally, the messaging fails to evolve, right? Salespeople are constantly getting feedback from the market. They're constantly tweaking their messaging, finding out what works, changing it. Every conversation makes them a little bit stronger, and they're able to kind of bob and weave and answer questions, and every single interaction makes their messaging a little bit tighter. Marketing, by definition, they tend to take a mid to long-term view. They have a little bit longer lead time to produce materials and white papers and follow-up information and all of that kind of stuff. Sales and marketing have to stay aligned and make sure that the messaging doesn't just stay stagnant. It has to continually evolve. So that feedback loop between sales and marketing is really important to keep that rolling.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't agree more with your points, Mike. I especially like, thinking marketing and sales, starting at the top. I've seen so often where the clashes between marketing and sales are really deeply ingrained in organizational processes and even the culture of the company. Sometimes, an objective third party is needed to conduct, somewhat of a quote unquote intervention,
100%,
yeah. To course correct. And that could mean a change management initiative, which definitely starts with getting, buy-in from the top.
And I think if you in facilitating that, and what we see is we'll sometimes have to just step back and remind them of the shared goal, remind them of the shared outcome we're all pursuing. And when you can get one party to look at the world through the other party's lens and understand, I mean, I love having a marketing person have to follow up on a lead, right? And I love a salesperson having to generate marketing activity, walk a mile in my shoes kind of approach. And that definitely builds up some empathy, right? So just continuing on this theme. So too often we see sales and marketing not working together. We see this tug of war. Hopefully it's not like Squid Games where they're falling off the platform here, but we do see certain areas where they're misaligned. And it starts with, who are we targeting and what priorities are we pursuing? When I think of targeting, I think in terms of accounts and then also entry points within those accounts. What titles or functional roles are we going for? And sometimes I have a client who their marketing director was very proud of the activity she generated for a webinar they were hosting. And I talked to the sales director and he said, these are lousy leads. These aren't even people who are in a buying position. And I gave that feedback back to the marketing director and she said, well, I know they want these people, but I can't get them to the webinar. These people, look at my conversion rate, though I have a high conversion rate. It's like, well, okay, we have to, I would rather have a lower conversion rate and have fewer people register, but the right people, right? And so when we see misaligned targets and priorities, that's obviously an issue. We have different metrics, right? Salespeople are focusing on different things. Salespeople tend to focus on number of net new appointments. So how many meetings can I schedule? Then they skip over all the good stuff in the sales process and they're looking at number of proposals or closable opportunities. Marketing people tend to look at things more like number of clicks or number of likes on social media or number of downloads or webinar registrations. They're looking at metrics that are really more focused on the top of the funnel, whereas salespeople are looking at metrics kind of within the funnel. And in my opinion, salespeople tend to look at the very top of the funnel and like what's coming out of the bottom, right? And so that's a source of conflict where they're not speaking the same language. This idea of what's qualified, right? There's the marketing qualified lead and sales qualified lead. It's the same word, but to me, from a salesperson's perspective, qualified means, hey, we've gone through a thorough discovery process. We've built the business case. There's a clear alignment. They need what we have. We've talked about the money. We've talked about the decision process. We've talked about the timeline. We've talked about the competitive context. We know who else on their side needs to be involved in the decision. Everything's fully lined up and we're ready to go to proposal. That's very late in the sales process. Whereas from a marketing perspective, they'll say, hey, an MQL, that means it's one of the accounts that we talked about, or it's in the industry that we talked about, it's a title that we talked about, and they downloaded a white paper, or they raised their hand somehow. Very different. And so we have to get alignment around, I think sometimes salespeople have this expectation, I'm getting a marketing qualified lead. Their expectation sometimes is that means all these other things have happened, and it really hasn't yet.
And it might be actually more of a raw lead than a qualified lead.
More of a raw lead, for sure. I think sales and marketing people perceive time differently. I think salespeople are always reacting. They're in the here and now. There's more stuff coming at them than they can do every day, and they're always playing catch up a little bit. Marketing people, on the other hand, by definition, have to take a mid to long-term view. I know a marketing director, and it was, we're here in Wisconsin, right? So it'd be, January, and he'd dress up in like a short sleeve shirt. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm thinking like it's June because I'm working on the conference in June. They're thinking 6 to 12 months ahead of time because that's what they have to do. And so there's different pace, different timelines, different expectations around time. I think it's very, salespeople are right now, marketing people are kind of more looking into the future. I think both sides are guilty of this. I think the best salespeople I know are 100% focused on the problem that they solve and helping and serving the prospect. And the best marketing people are the same way. And yet, we somehow wind up talking about how cool our product is, or we talk about the new feature. Hey, we have this new, report that we can generate from our software, and isn't that amazing? And look at all this stuff. And we start solving a problem before we even asked a question to know if they have it. And I think we'll all do better when both sales and marketing focus on the customer and their problems rather than how cool and sexy our product is.
Right.
So those are, the last one is the clumsy handoffs, right? That's the dialing in when a lead's generated, how is that going to the sales team? And when the sales team pursues it and, either moves it to the point where it needs to be nurtured or moves it to the point where it needs some follow-up activity, they're interacting with marketing. Again, it comes back to too much finger pointing, too much, hey, to me versus by me kind of mindset. And we see a lot of, kind of missed opportunities because there's not a smooth process and it doesn't really flow very well.
Mm.
And then, part of that is the poor follow up and follow through. I would say sales is more guilty of this, right? We're not pursuing leads with the same vigor of the leads that we generate ourselves. So these are some of the problems that we see in terms of the teams not working together and where they show up. But I'm curious on your perspective on this, Marianne.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with all your points. I mean, if marketing and sales can speak the same language, and actually go through the exercise of defining what is an ideal customer, those criteria for an ideal lead really help in the long term to ensure that marketing and sales are on the same page. What we like to do is kind of reverse engineer the number of leads that are needed to achieve a revenue goal. And this type of conversation really shifts to more logic. So it's so important to remove the emotions, from these conversations.
So when we get a little further in the deck here, I'll share the baseline selling sales system with you. Let's talk about how we help, because we do the same thing. We'll start kind of at the bottom of the sales funnel and work our way up and just try and by rep, trying to understand, well, how many activities do you need at each stage of the sales process? And then I don't know a single salesperson I work with who wouldn't be thrilled to have marketing own some of that and help them get there faster. So I think that's a great topic.
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, what if marketing said, okay, well, we know we need sales leads. Maybe we need 4 this month to meet the revenue goals. And marketing said, okay, well, we can contribute as a marketing team and commit to 2 of those leads, right? And working hand in hand with sales.
Yeah, amazing. So imagine where we're all pulling together. We have sales and marketing alignment, and this is starts with, like you just said, let's understand our priorities and our targets. Let's define that account level, target, and also the entry point within the account. And there's lots of ways, depending on what you're selling. A lot of the clients we work with are selling complex, large ticket items where there's multiple buyers. It's a multi-party buying process. I believe salespeople sometimes start the conversation based on where they're comfortable. I have clients who are salespeople who are engineers, and they like to call on other engineers because they can talk engineering speak, and they avoid the plant manager or the operations manager because they may be asked business questions, and that's not always the right way. So when both sales and marketing can have alignment around, these are the targets, and this is the ideal, sort of buyer persona we're after, and these are the problems that they're likely going to have. When a salesperson can almost start the conversation as if they've already had a couple conversations based on the good work that marketing is doing to engage them, based on what they're downloading, what they're pulling off the website, or what emails or campaigns they're clicking on, they have insight into that buyer, and they can start the conversation in a different place. So it's very powerful when you have those clear priorities and targets. And from a priorities perspective, even understanding seasonality, time of year, product launches, product emphasis, when sometimes we have to have marketing realize, hey, our team isn't fully developed yet. We've got 3 new people in this territory. Let's dial back the activity there until we get them up to speed. Or we've got new people, they need leads, they've got capacity, dial back on these areas that are more mature. When you can actually overlay capacity,
right,
and have marketing support that, it's really powerful. Part of that is, once you define those priorities and targets, let's have some mutual accountability. Let's have some shared metrics. Let's, like you said, if we need 4 opportunities per month and marketing can generate 2 of them, let's define that, and let's measure each of them and kind of make adjustments as we go.
Yeah, a big part of that is lead score. That works.
Lead scoring. Yeah. And we'll do lead scoring. We'll do opportunity scoring within different stages of the sales process.
Right.
Let's define, again, with scoring, what's their definition of qualified, right? And even though we're using qualified in different stages and in different ways, let's all get on the same page of what that means at each point in the process.
Right.
I think this is really important. Clear rules of engagement. I talked about
Mhm.
clumsy handoffs. I talked about not following up and following through, discarding leads. I think there almost needs to be service level agreements. We know if a lead, someone's on your website and you call them, I'm gonna get the stat wrong, forgive me. But I want to say if someone is on your website and they download something, if they're contacted within 15 minutes, your odds of closing are ridiculously high. And every hour that goes by from that initial download to when they're followed up, your odds diminish, right? And we know that when marketing works so hard to generate these leads, salespeople need to be kind of on standby, ready to go, and call them right away, and pursue them. And then as they go through the process, and they need to hand it back to marketing for nurturing or for follow up or to find other people in the organization that they need to engage or whatever, marketing needs to respond to that.
Yeah.
And salespeople are always urgent and always in a rush and never fully organized. It's just the way we are, right? So marketing people have to kind of be ready to respond to that. And when you work, and again, it starts at the top, when the sales leader and the marketing leader can define rules of engagement
Mhm.
and talk about, hey, what's a reasonable time frame? All leads will be followed up within within X amount of time, and everything will be entered in the CRM within 24 hours or whatever the time frame is.
Right.
It's going to depend on what you're selling, what the typical sales cycle is, et cetera. But that's really important to have those rules of engagement. 100% focus on the prospect's problem. Again, forget about the features and benefits about how cool your product or service is. Spend all your time on how do we help companies improve, grow, save money, make money, improve quality, improve efficiencies, reduce costs, all those, areas where we can find compelling reasons to buy. When we're all focused on that, the conversations go a lot smoother.
Yeah.
And then with those rules of engagements, we can start to have clean handoffs and clear follow up and follow through. All of these activities help us get alignment and find a better way. And so let me just pause and see if you have any comments on that, and then I want to get to the five. I want to leave your audience with 5 clear takeaways that they can put to work right away. But I'm curious if you have feedback on what I just shared.
Yeah, I love how you outlined the problems and then flipped the solution to align to each point. That's perfect. One of the biggest gaps that I see between sales and marketing teams is the lack of a formal nurturing process. So this is where we have clear agreements between how prospects are taken care of, and like you said, both marketing and sales have that same objective to make sure that the prospects are being addressed, their problems are being addressed in a very clear way. They're taken care of, right? So there's often a lack, without this nurturing process, there's a lack of some rigor, which leaves a lot of really good leads on the table. So I'm curious, what your approach is in helping sales folks address that.
Well, when we look at high performing salespeople, they do nurturing naturally and they do it on their own. They may not do it with the same rigor or discipline that a marketing team would, but their ability to keep their prospects engaged until the timing is right is better than everyone else on the sales team. Most salespeople, if you're not buying from me right now, they kind of move on to the next one. They live in the here and now and they let these leads kind of languish. And so I think marketing can help in 2 ways. One, giving those high performing salespeople who are already doing nurturing more tools, more ammunition, more options, while also giving them some flexibility. Because I'll also share, high performing salespeople hate being told what to do. Shocker, I know. And so when marketing can give them options, here's a white paper that might be good at this point in the process. Here's a good testimonial. Here's a good, example that you might want to share. And then they can kind of put their spin on it. That's perfect. I think so. One, how do you support those top performers? And then for the salespeople who aren't doing any sort of nurturing, can you give them at least a base framework? And Again, giving them some flexibility, but I think you can be a little bit more heavy-handed with those people and just say, hey, this is what you need to do at this point in the process, and make sure that it's fall off the log simple. They can do it without a lot of effort, and just kind of work it that way.
Yeah, and I'll say a top performing marketer will know how to collaborate with both of those two scenarios. So to provide guidance, and really help maybe the more junior salesperson nurture, but then in the senior situation, collaborate with them, and truly understand what's going to help them close that business, so yeah, there's different levels of nurturing, and there can be definitely some more processes, I think, in most organizations to make sure that really good leads are not left on the table.
And I think the important thing with that, and I agree with everything you just said, I think it's building in those feedback loops.
Yeah.
So that, we test and measure and figure out what's working and what's not.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So let me just kind of share five. I want to leave your audience with kind of 5 takeaways so they can put this. This is all great theory, but how do we put it to work? So, not a surprise. We're starting with market definition, and that starts with the buyer persona. What titles? I think titles are sometimes misleading. So I also like to think in terms of functional role, the person responsible for quality assurance or internet security or whatever. They may have different titles, but it's important that you look at that buyer persona from what are they responsible for, and then understanding the different geographical filters, again, market coverage, different types of products and package filters that might kind of feed into that as well. What are we pursuing at different times of year? And then, like I said, when sales is short-staffed in some areas or overstaffed in others, or has, depending on where their team has capacity, the more marketing can align with that, and get that granular in the market definition. Most companies do not do this, and when it happens, it can be really powerful. Engagement, right? So starts with prospect-centric messaging. When one of the things we do when we evaluate a sales team is we'll ask people to record their elevator pitch. And if you have 10 salespeople on your team, you'll have 15 different messages. I mean, it's just none of them are the same. It's amazing. You'll see maybe common threads or common themes, but for the most part, they're all over the place. And so when sales and marketing get aligned on, hey, this is our market and this is how we're going to serve them. And to that end, we use a tool we call our conversation builder that starts with a positioning statement. Selling is about telling stories. Right. Selling is about explaining what you do in terms that the prospect can immediately grab onto. We help quality assurance engineers who are frustrated by fill in the blank. Right. And then you give a couple stories or a couple examples. Usually this happens or that happens, and they're looking for a better way, right? And then when you get the right level of engagement, marketing position sales, like I said earlier, it's almost like you're dropping them into the second or third conversation because they've already resonated with some of the messaging and they've downloaded stuff or engaged in some way. And then sales can leverage marketing by, like we talked about a minute ago, the nurturing, handing them back to sales, or handing them back to marketing so they can kind of keep that prospect alive. And then it's never just one and done. You've got to continually build in that feedback loop, review, refine, repeat. It's like rinse, lather, repeat. So engagement, getting to marketing qualified leads and even sales qualified leads, sales follow-up, first sales conversation. It's really important that they're pursuing that right away and that they're, that they're looking at that, whether it's a raw lead or a marketing qualified lead, they're chasing it, getting in front of that prospect right away, starting the conversation. And they have to be super disciplined and consistent with that. And then tracking the outcomes and providing feedback. To me, your CRM is your single source of truth. You can't guess. It has to be in there. I can tell you salespeople hate entering information in the CRM, but that's where it needs to be. That's the intelligence that marketing can get, and adjust their programs accordingly. Understanding the sales opportunity. I'll go through this in the next slide, but basically we look at the different phases. So there's all the stuff to get in front of them. Then you go through a discovery phase. You think of the discovery phase as building the case for why they would want to partner with you. Qualifying, making sure you're understanding the budget and the timing, the competitive context and all of that. Now you're at the proposal phase and then closing phase. It's not advancing. Here we go. And we use something we call the inoffensive close. It's premised on being a helpful problem solver, not a hard selling closer. It's basically based on our conversations. Do you feel we understand your situation? Based on our approach and what we're recommending, do you feel we have the expertise to help? Would you like our help? It's a lot smoother than, do you want to buy it in red or green, right? Just high pressure close. And then lastly, this nurturing, like we were talking about, that follow-up rhythm. How can marketing and sales continue to add value throughout the dialogue? Sometimes the buyer's timing doesn't line up with our sales cycle. They've got to wait for their next budget, or they have to get approval or whatever. How do we continue to provide information throughout the process to give them value-added content? When do we re-engage if they've gone dormant, or maybe they've been quiet for a while? How do we get them back in the fold, and how do we get back to the top of their list? And then, to me, after the close, that's the best time to come back and really find the next opportunity. So I know we've only got a minute left here, but I wanted to share, this is the sales process that we use, Dave Kerlin's baseline selling. And so I think of marketing, it's really all the stuff kind of between the batter's box and first base. First base is an appointment. Then you go through the discovery phase, and then you're at second base once you've helped build a case, you've confirmed there's a good fit. Second to third is all about qualifying. And then third to home is a closable opportunity. That's where you're telling your stories and using your examples and success stories and testimonials to build the case and then do the inoffensive close. I see marketing helping in all of these activities. I think this path from first to second and second to third, that's where nurturing can be so important. That's where a salesperson may hand them back to marketing and vice versa. Right. And then, over time, the leads will get better with, the activity will get better and the messaging get better with that right feedback between sales and marketing.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to cover. Let me just go to this and any other comments you have?
That's awesome. Great, solid approach. We think a lot alike, Mike. So I'm not sure why companies have such an issue with sales and marketing misalignment. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. It's really awesome to get your perspective on these points, and welcome you back in the future. And we'll do this again sometime.
Sounds great. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you. Everybody who's listening gets a copy of Mike's new book, The Sales Team You Deserve. Thanks, everyone, and we hope you enjoyed this presentation. And please forward the recording you receive onto your peers and to your colleagues. Have a great day. Bye-bye.